Traffic accidents are usually the stuff of local newscasts. They seldom result in international headlines, but that's what's happened in Bangladesh, where 2 road fatalities triggered weeks of protests and then landed a renowned photojournalist in prison. Shahidul Alam has been arrested, charged for making false and provocative comments in an interview on this channel, Al Jazeera. He criticized the alleged excessive use of force on demonstrators who were demanding road safety, and he questioned the legitimacy of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government. There's a general election coming up later this year, and the government has grown increasingly intolerant of critical voices, especially those on the media space it finds most difficult to control, the internet. The authorities rely on a vaguely worded law, the Information and Communications Technology Act, which can land anyone publishing fake and obscene material online behind bars. And the effect on journalism in Bangladesh has been chilling. Our starting point this week is Dhaka.
Joining us now via Skype from Dhaka is Shahidul Alam. He is a photographer and social activist.
I think the government has miscalculated. It certainly felt that fear was enough, repression would have been enough, but I think you cannot tame an entire nation in this manner.
As a photojournalist, Shahidul Alam usually works with images, not words. And when it comes to Bangladeshi politics these days, journalists must choose their words very carefully.
In terms of why this was seen as a threat, he was critical of the government.
The gagging of the media, the extrajudicial killings, the disappearances, bribery at all levels, corruption in education. It's a never-ending list.
He was critical of the political system too, beyond simply the government. This happened live on an international television channel, which means that the government's narrative that they put out every time protests occur suddenly could be challenged.
I can't imagine any other person really who would have been quite so articulate and quite so straightforward in his analysis of the Bangladesh political situation.
It's an unelected government, so they do not really have a mandate to rule, but they've been clinging on by brute force.
It was a perfectly cogent, legitimate critique of the Bangladesh political situation. And I think that the Bangladesh authorities really just could not stand the idea of an articulate Bangladeshi speaking from Bangladesh to the international community about the political situation in Bangladesh in such stark terms.
The protests that set this story into motion over the recurring issue of road safety in Bangladesh and the deaths of 2 students in particular quickly morphed into something larger, more political. And with an election coming up later this year, it's a sensitive time there.
Students came out to protest. Now, this was a non-partisan thing. It was students saying that demanding safe streets. And it did begin to kind of build support in Bangladesh. The Bangladesh authorities initially were quite sympathetic to this. They even promised to enact a new law. But when they began to feel that there might be political opposition also joining into this, or other dissidents or other critics, the crackdown was enormous. And that, the fact that children were beating on the streets, really sparked the outrage in Bangladesh.
There are certain interested quarters who tried to politicize this whole movement, and there are certain 3 or 4 clashes in certain quarters of Dhaka, clashes with the law enforcing agency and certain hoodlums. So that is a stray incident which is not acceptable, but this is not a crackdown on the children's movement.
The government's approach is to control the narrative as well as the situation. Situation they control with violence. Narrative they control by silencing any form of dissent, so that the only message you are getting is what the government is saying. They flood the airwaves with that, both through mainstream and social media. And I'm being extremely kind to the government by saying what they say is being economic with the truth. They have been lying outright.
Bangladesh right now is in the news for all the right reasons. The Bangladesh government has taken in nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees. The Prime Minister has been recognized quite rightly for this effort. They do not want the international community to know about the other bad things that this government is doing. And therefore, when Shahidul Alam raised those concerns, they clearly felt that this was undermining their image internationally.
When he goes to trial, Shahidul Alam is likely to be charged under the Information, Communications and Technology Act, a law passed long ago in 2006. Sheikh Hasina's government took power in 2009 and amended the law 4 years later. The changes it made to Section 57, dealing with content that people post online, and the frequent prosecutions since, have been criticized by Media Watch NGOs outside Bangladesh and protested by free speech activists within the country. Online content there is undeniably an issue. Some of it, dealing with politics and religion, is nasty and dangerous. Violence has resulted, people have been killed. However, Section 57 is so vaguely worded, it allows the authorities to prosecute the government's critics easily and selectively.
The media, the television, the newspapers, they've controlled it, journalists are censored, what happens there, they don't really mind, okay? They've got that under control. So therefore, people have moved to social media as a way of voicing criticism. Inevitably, social media will be misused by people. It does have the potential to incite violence, but what the government seems to be doing is using it as a pretext to clamp down much more widely on any kind of criticism as a way of intimidating and scaring people so they won't comment on social media in the future.
We have seen free thinkers, free-thinking bloggers and atheists being charged under this, whereas we have had members of the government, ministers, high-ranking officials, we've had the Prime Minister's own son, who is seen as her heir apparent, flood social media and mainstream media with lies which have not been challenged. Under this law, if this is to be applied universally to every single Bangladeshi citizen, they should be charged too.
Shahidul Alam's case is unusual. He's a prominent figure, so people are talking about it. But according to the NGO Human Rights Watch, dozens of government critics, opposition politicians, academics, journalists, and bloggers disappear every year in what are called enforced disappearances. Many of them turn up dead, are never seen again, and are never covered by the Bangladeshi media. It's no wonder the Listening Post struggled to find journalists there to speak to us for this story. The only one who did agree to talk did so on the condition that we masked his identity.
We are living under a regime which goes by the name of a democracy, but really is not. The oppression of opposition voices comes in different forms. If someone threatens the government, they are indicted and go to jail. But in a lot of cases, people will be abducted without any legal cases being filed. And the government will simply say those people left their houses because they were having problems with their wives or girlfriends. They do this so that people will not blame the government. And in cases when a person is not very prominent, unlike Mr. Alam, who is very well known, the newspapers will not publish reports on his or her disappearance. So the threat is very present. You can understand the fear. The government is so powerful.
There are many nameless, faceless citizens who are subjected to the worst kind of inhumanities in custody that we can think of. They are also less likely to be ever freed due to the lack of any form of pressure being exerted on their behalf, the likes of which we've seen for Shahidul Alam, certainly.
The arrest of Shahidul Alam, the silencing of one voice, the chilling of others, is something that the government knew would draw criticism. It's a price that, in an election year, the authorities were clearly willing to pay for a message they seemingly wanted to send. The heat is on in Bangladesh, and journalists are among the many who are feeling it.